The class stood in front of me, unable to take their eyes off my permanent smug grin. My period-accurate British uniform from World War I, the Gordon Highlanders specifically, was probably drawing more eyes than my smug smirk, to be honest. It was a kilted version, not trousered. My grandmother would be proud to see me in this thing. "Welcome, ladies," I said with glee as I grabbed my satchel. Jessica, one of the many cat girls we had at the school, raised her hand. Poor Jessica, always the first to ask a question. Sir, what's with the outfit?" "Because today we are going on a field trip, my dear. That's why. Your academic scores are the best in the school. I'm so damn proud of you, so I got permission to take you girls on a very, very special field trip," I replied with glee. One of the elven girls in the back, Olivia, started to raise her hand. I stopped her. "And don't worry. I do have part of the school budget set out especially for this. I am in fact paying for lunch. So don't worry about finances, everything's all paid for." "Phew," came her response. "Right. Firstly, school first. Who can tell me what this is?" I said, gesturing to my uniform complete with weaponry. Alari, one of the dark elves, the class smarty pants, hand shot right up. "It's a uniform of a soldier, sir. I believe the uniform of a Highlander?" "Correct. This is the uniform of a Scots Highlander, a soldier from the British side of the First World War. Now, who can tell me what this is?" I said, and procured a rifle with a bayonet from a nearby secured box. They hesitated. They were always nervous around guns. Then one of the cat girls, Lily, raised a hand up. Lee. Lee Field. Or something. Close enough. The Lee Enfield 1888. This is a bolt-action magazine-fed rifle used by the British Army during the war. This specific one, however, is part of my personal collection. This beauty was held by a soldier who saw action in the Somme, I said with a smirk. Mutterings of "Is that even allowed?" and "But I don't like guns. Mom said they are evil magic," came from them. Now, ladies, this is part of your curriculum and you have to learn about it anyway. You're part of Earth now, you need to learn as much as I did when I was a kid. Now, I'm not allowed to just let you have fun. No, you're on school time, so I have to make it educational, I said, and moved over to a nearby table. I removed some cloth coverings and stuff from a table, allowing them to look at some artifacts and things. A helmet, a pistol, a few bayonets, an inactive grenade, and some related text and displays, including a cutaway and design model for the rifle. "Notebooks out," I said, and ordered them to sit in the makeshift class I laid out in the gymnasium. I didn't go too deep into the lore of the Joker arc of the British Empire and explained things about the uniform, demonstrating the kilt, accessories, and belts that kept it all together. I showed them some of the marching, poses, and regimental salutes that came with it, even demonstrating with the rifle a bayonet charge. They scribbled away, my lecture being interrupted only by the occasional giggle or question. They got a little bit scared when I demonstrated the use and wear of a gas mask, explaining a bit of the lore behind that. But after an hour, I got through my lesson and told them to grab their satchels and backpacks. "Present yourselves accordingly, ladies, we're about to go out in public. Back straight, chins up, hands front. Very good. To the parking lot. By the left. Mart," I barked. I marched along with them, some girls just walking. The more enthusiastic or less socially tied down girls were actively marching with me, matching my steps. It was so cute. In the parking lot itself, a special surprise was waiting for them. Some of my boys from the Historical Reenactment Society I belonged to were waiting. With the principal and school's permission, of course. With a class of 20 students, I had to make sure we had plenty of room for the trip, so all of the guys were there with their private collections. The girls were a bit apprehensive but marched along with me. I brought them alongside the display of military hardware. In the stands, classes had been interrupted and all of the students who had windows were staring at the display. The principal, a short, stocky wood elf woman, and the superintendent had both shown up to see what was going on. "And squad halt!" I yelled, the girls stopping, then giggling amongst each other for a bit. "Right. Today is a special day, courtesy of the World Order Historical Preservation Society. I present to you Tank," I said. The bow-eyes got their cue from that, and the sound of tank engines suddenly roared into life. Each tank had been painted in the school's colors with a soluble paint, emblazoned with the school's emblem, and had a license plate bolted to the back for temporary road use. Presented before you ladies is a Sturmgeschütz 3 Stu-G assault gun. A Panzerkampfwagen Mk4 with shirts and skirts. A Matilda 2 medium tank. An Italian P40 heavy tank. AT-34 85M medium tank. And finally, a Semuvente DA-7534. I was going to bring one from my own personal collection, a Russian KV-2, but it's too heavy for use on public roads, so it's at the range waiting for us. Now, before we go, I have to lay down some ground rules. I yelled out above the engine noise. I waved a signal and the drivers used some less than ancient tech to quieten and muffle the roaring tank engine noises. A good decision. Some of these tanks didn't like being awake, so a muffle engine was a good option. I didn't ask what it was they used, I just appreciated the opportunity to teach my students. I explained safety procedures and they took notes. Never remove the helmet or your ear protections, with specially designed earguards to keep the foxgirls, elves, and catgirls' ears more comfy during the trip. I told them to tie their skirts down to not get caught, how to sit in the tank comfortably, and demonstrated how to safely walk over each tank so they don't get anything caught. The principal handed them some ties to neaten their hair and keep it out of the machinery. After about 10 minutes of explaining safety procedures, I let them climb onto their tank of choice, introduce themselves to the crew, who then explained to not touch the cannons or weaponry around the tanks. Yet. We trundled out of the parking lot towards the main road where a set of 3 state troopers' patrol cars were waiting for us. After double-checking necessary paperwork, they cleared us and sent us on our way, with 2 patrol cars deciding to stick around with us for their own lunch break. We trundled along the main road, getting side glances and open cheers from the passers-by as we made our way through intersections and through the main street of a large town. I sat in the commander's cupola in the Panzer IV at the front of the formation as we made our way to the town, police and state troopers giving us right of way through the bustling mini-metropolis. We arrived at the Burger King, and I ordered the same for everyone, a nice Whopper meal with fries and soda, except Griselda, the youngest of the students who didn't like fries. I just got her an extra serving of coleslaw. We drove into the parking lot and with a crowd gathering around us. The bow-eyes all hopped out of their vehicles, grabbing their period and faction-accurate equipment, and escorted the students into the restaurant so we could eat. For obvious reasons, the German bow-eyes were wearing World War ONE uniforms and gear, instead of WW2 gear. For reasons that should be obvious. Lunch was a casual affair and all round just a damn good time. The students flooded the bow-eyes and myself, of course, with a litany of questions which we gladly answered, with passers-by casually taking selfies and pics with uniformed officers, and Burger King themselves offering to take a professional photo with us all another day for a promotion they were doing. When lunch was done, we mounted up our tanks again and drove about 40 minutes away to a nearby gun range that had a vehicle track. The vehicles all parked in the dirt field by the range, and I held a full sermon on firearm safety protocol and made absolutely sure they knew that any violation of safety protocol would in fact result in damage to their academic record. I made sure they knew I wasn't screwing around when it came to the task at hand. Then came the fun part. Right. So, here's the most important question. Who won a Boom DA big gun? I said, to a cheer from the bow-eyes and immediate hand raises from every student. Okay, we'll do it the hard way. Question: what was the first ever armored vehicle or tank to have a traversable turret mechanism? I asked. A few moments of silence followed and Jessica the Catgirl raised her hand. There. I think it was called the Foot something. 17? Correct. The French Renault Foot 17 was the very first tank ever developed and deployed in battle equipped with a turret traversal mechanism. "Congrats, Jessica, you get dibs on firing the first shot." She squealed in delight and hurried towards me. Before we started, I used a mechanism nearby, which was a replica of the gun carriage used by the Matilda II for demonstration purposes, and showed each one how to load, aim, and fire safely. When the demonstration was done, I hopped into the Matilda, which was the cheapest to operate for sustained fire exercises, which this was about to be. Every girl would get her chance to try to fire the cannon at least once. She eagerly followed, and I had to calm her down a bit. I put her in the gunner's seat, and sat myself in the loader's seat. The Ordnance QF 2-pounder 40mm gun was ready to be used. I loaded the first shell, making sure she saw exactly what to do. I slipped the shell into the breech, yelling "Live shell loaded." When the shell was in, I poked my head out of the cupola and said "Fire in the hole," and put Jessica in the gunner's seat. I showed her where to aim and what to do. "Ready. Aim. Fire," I yelled. Jessica's finger pulled the trigger. The entire tank shook from the force of the gun's recoil, the cabin's interior reverberating from the violent impact. Outside, preparations for the sonic boom from the shell were adequate. None of the girls even flinched from the noise, but they did flinch from the cannon itself actually firing. The shell whizzed through the air, missing a target propped up against a hill by a few feet. The shell was a hollow fragmentation shell filled with blue dye powder, designed to disintegrate on impact and create a show more than do any damage. Jessica was shivering from the effect. I leaned in and gave her a little hug to calm her down and let her get used to the shock. "That felt kind of good," she said with a soft, but scared giggle. "Yeah. That's good. Exhilarating, isn't it? It gets so much more intense the bigger the gun you use too. The explosion is also bigger." "Feeling okay, hun?" I asked, gently patting her back. "Yeah," she said with excitement. I expended the empty shell casing from the mechanism, tossing it in a basket behind me. I let Jessica out and she rejoined her classmates, who immediately swamped her with questions and concerns. I repeated the process 18 more times, each girl getting the chance to unleash a shell to the joy of the crowd. Each time I asked them a question, deliberately avoiding a particular student when doing so. The boys carried on doing their usual thing in the background as I carried out my lesson, checking their own gear and making sure their tanks were not sinking into the dirt on the range too much, occasionally moving their vehicles to a new spot. Finally we came to Amalia, a high elf girl who had the best score of any student in school. Just as she was about to enter the Matilda, I stopped her. "Am I not allowed to fire the gun, sir? Is something wrong?" she asked, pouting. "Nah. You're just the best student here, therefore you get the bigger gun. Come, the Sturmgeschütz is waiting." I patted her head and directed her to the Stoogie. The boys also mounted up, with myself in the loader's seat, Brother Boris in the driver's seat and Brother Lowe on the commander's seat. I helped Amolio in the gunner's seat and let her figure her way around it. "Squad ready," I barked. "Engine on," Brother Boris yelled. "Panzer vor," Brother Lowe yelled in response. The Stoogie charged off the platform and onto the dirt track, where we did a short obstacle course in record time. Amalia and I both stuck our heads out of the cupolas above the tank, and she squealed with glee as we charged our way through the course. Splashing mud and roaring engines did not dissuade her from having the time of her life as we trundled at a good lick through the freshly rained-on course. She was having the time of her life and she deserved it. After about 5 minutes or so, we got around to the actual firing range part of the course and I headed back into my loader's seat. I showed her the mechanism, demonstrated with a fake shell for how it worked and set the empty casing aside. I showed her how to aim it and showed her the target. Just as I was about to load a shell, she stopped everything. Wait. This is too good. I have to," she yelled, stopping everything. "Are you okay?" I asked as she moved out of the seat back out of the cupola. She mockingly shuffled herself out of the cupola and deliberately moved herself so her butt got stuck in it a bit. "Ooh. Help me step tank. I'm Stoogie," she said with a new face and cheekily putting her pinky to her cheek. A watching crowd face slapped and all of us burst into laughter from it. I half laughed, half cringed as this elven lady pulled one of the silliest jokes in the tank world. She giggled to herself and wriggled back inside as the crowd laughed with applause at the funny. Needless to say, with the laughing crowd, her giggling classmates and chuckling police nearby, she got extra credit for that. She squeezed herself back into the cupola, onto the seat and back into the gun position. She had to wait a bit while we got ourselves back together, either from nearly dying by cringe in the case of Brother Boris or laughter in the case of Brother Lowe. Eventually we got ourselves back together and I watched carefully as she loaded the shell. "Live shell loaded," she yelled out. Brother Lowe began his signature command in Polish. TRZY. Dwa. Jeden. Kawa. The 75mm cannon fired, the blast several times louder and more pronounced than the Matilda's 2-pounder gun, the shockwave larger and more vicious. The cabin reverberated with the impact, and I quickly grabbed the expended shell casing. I didn't give Amalia much time to respond as I tapped her on the shoulder to get her attention as I loaded and readied another shell. She was breathing heavily and shaking, but like a trooper she soldiered on and fired another shell, this one actually hitting one of the targets we had on display. The hidden tannerite under the targets detonated and created a nice boom on the side of the hill. I loaded and made Amalia fire 6 more shells, destroying 3 more targets before finally saying bingo shells, and forcing us to return to the range where everyone was waiting. As soon as we came to a full stop, the tank's engine off, Amalia jumped out of the tank, nearly stumbling and charged into her waiting classmates' excited cheers and hugs. They learned something, and knew that lessons were learned, parsons inflamed, extra credit earned. Best field trip ever.